I'm going to go straight to the first question that came in. It was an observation actually from Inga, and she said that she was very pleased that you talked, Alexia, you particularly talked about people on their own terms, meeting people on their own terms. And I think that was definitely something that also resonated with me. And I think Lily too has she's talked about that, meeting people where they are. So could you just tell us a little more about that? I mean, why is that so important? What does it really matter that element of the co-production and participation is there?
So many things to unpack in this, but I'll try and give a organized answer. Why it matters, I think. One of the first reasons why I think it matters, and it's I recently, just very recently, participated in at an event on cultural rights. I don't know if many of you are familiar with this notion of cultural rights, and central to this idea is that culture comes in many forms, and who is to say what is culture and what is not? Traditional institutions and so on. People have cultural practices. They might not be the one that you offer in your own institutions, but they do have cultural practices, and they do have reading practices. And the best way to invite them to come in your institution is to, one, identify those practices, and then give them value and explain to them that these have value. Because a lot of people will tell you, oh, culture, no, not for me. I don't go to the theater. I don't. But they spend hours reading manga literature, for instance. And so it's also part of our job to maybe not redefine, but kind of open up what definitions of culture and cultural consumption we have and we convey through our institutions. So that's one of the reasons. I don't want to take too much space, but I think that's maybe one thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. So there's a sense of what you've sort of shared there is that sense of this barrier, that in terms of this cultural barrier that exists. I mean, if we can generalize, perhaps in our world as well, within cultural institutions, this barrier is also there in terms of what we really see as being important or valuable. Lily, how does that resonate with your work? Do you find the same sort of questions there, that people don't really see themselves in that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, the building itself is it gives an imposing sort of impression to those who have never stepped into this building. There is also a misconception that this Concertgebouw Bruges is only for a particular for an elite group of people, people who are well-to-do, who can afford to pay. And at the moment, we also see a lot of among our public, we see majority are white and retired people. Also because retired people have more time, and also they have more money to come. But what the people outside who lives really close by to Concertgebouw, I'm really surprised. Like, I've met people who live so nearby the building, from Afghanistan, from Singapore, from India. They have lived all their life nearby Concertgebouw Bruges, which exists here for 21 years, but they have never felt the urge to enter the building, or they don't even know where the entrance is. So when I finally reached out to them, and I convinced them to come together as a group, because for some of them, it's not just a financial barrier to come here, because the tickets are not probably the most not too financially affordable for them, but the social barrier to come here alone is already huge. So I tried to reach out to them by offering them the possibility to come as a group. And I'm always there to welcome them. I'm always there to welcome, especially the first-time visitors, from nearby the building, to give them a sense of belonging, to give them a huge sense of welcome, which everyone actually needs. That the feeling of recognition, the feeling of being seen, the feeling of that someone is actually extending their hand to welcome them into the building.
Yes, that's really, and that moves beautifully on to a question that's been raised by Aneta in the chat, and also a comment from Susanna. And do keep these comments and questions coming in, please, so that we can have this conversation. But Alexia, Aneta says, Alexia has mentioned that sometimes people don't see the libraries, but could it be the opposite way round? Was her question. In other words, is it, you know, is it that the libraries or museums or the arts organizations simply don't see all of the, you know, potential, all of the people out there that are literally potential visitors and collaborators? What's your sort of feeling about that? I know you touched on it a bit, but
well, to be honest, I think most professionals who work in museums and libraries are very much aware of who comes in and who doesn't, especially when they're located in a specific neighborhood or environment where they see that the neighbors of the institutions are just never walking in. I think, and it touches upon what we were discussing just before that about meeting people on their own term. I think it's what makes the difference is the departure point of how we do our work. And again, it's something that I try and talk about when we do training or when I work with institutions, is that most of us, and it's normal, you know, but most of us will start projects, will start strategies with a point of departure that is our own expertise and sometimes our own taste and interests as professionals. And so we create exhibitions and events and programs for people like us, basically. And even if we have in mind a specific audience, that departure point is always, you know, I like this topic. I'm confident in this topic because I studied this topic. And so I will do the program around this topic. And I think that it's very important when you want to attract new audiences to decentralize the focus on yourself and on your expertise and on your strength as a professional, and to try and focus again on what people do, what they want, what they aspire to, what might be relevant to them. And this is what a lot of what we call user-centric methods suggest that we should do. So to answer your questions, I think people see the audiences that are not coming in, but I think that they don't see how they can refocus that point of departure and that energy on the audience rather than trying to find a solution within their own range of expertise. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I'd really like to probe that a little bit more, actually, because I'm curious to know, and it was a question that I jotted down myself. It's like, how do you do that? How do you talked about your participatory methods, the co-production, collaboration. These are fine words. And they're very kind of, you know, very inspiring, but it's so important, isn't it, to actually break that down into what does that actually mean? And you've started us on that journey, but how do you get the buy-in from you're asking people within who are, as it were, on the inside, you're asking them to start from somewhere else, to literally move their whole sort of sense of self and sense of what's important. How do you get the buy-in, and how important is it to have a whole institution engaged in this rather than it just being a person's job? Two big questions there, and Lily, I can see you nodding, and I'll get your thoughts on this in a moment too.
Well, so how do you get the buy-in? I'm going to be a bit blunt, maybe, but most libraries and most cultural institutions have a duty of public service. And even I, as a for-profit entity, this is what I fight for. This is very important for me, the importance of public service and making culture accessible and enjoyable to everyone. And so that's kind of the bottom line. If you work in a public institution, you should be ready to decentralize the focus on your own expertise as a professional and put it on the audience, because they're the people you're supposed to be serving. So that's kind of a, kind of simple and direct answer to your question. And then to just the second part of your question was how do you bring
buy-in from the whole organization and the importance of that, rather than it being just a group or a person or.
Again, I think deep down, most people working in public institutions will agree that this is their mission, to serve everyone and not just a happy few that are already very much how do you say, accustomed to cultural practices. So this argument of the public service, and then to be honest, it's the kind of project, and I'm sure Lily will be able to talk about this, that will change the way professionals see their job, experiment their job, and it makes huge differences in the way they feel about their job. And although not all cultural institutions' mission is to, save the world, I do think that carrying a few audience engagement projects that focus on audiences that are hard to reach, that are minorized, I don't know if it's a word in English, but that really makes a difference in most, not everyone, but most of the professionals' outlook on their own job.
That's really interesting. I guess that's the anthropologist in you speaking. I mean, if we have more time, I'd love to probe a little bit more about behavior, and that's absolutely fascinating. But Lily, what your response to what we're talking about buy-in, and about how, what are your thoughts? I saw you nodding as you were listening to Alexia there.
So when I first started working in this sector, I'm quite new to the culture sector, to be honest. I've always taken part as a participant, so I was always on the other side of the spectrum. I realized there's a huge goodwill for diversity and inclusion in the whole sector. So, like Alexia mentioned, those people who are working in the sector, they know deep down that there is a huge space for goodwill to open up to people who otherwise don't reach the organization, but they lack the knowledge or the ways how to work around it, and how do they just make it more accessible. So I really appreciate the space and the autonomy that I receive from my director and from my coordinator to experiment and to try different methods and approaches to find the public that Concertabout is not reaching out to. So I've really used many different methods, and from one organization and one partner, I reached to the other. So the fact that I could experiment and I have the space to do it has enabled me to also reach out to many different sorts of people, and the idea is also to give them, like, I can't emphasize the importance of creating a sense of belonging and giving them a space for them to be able to identify themselves as a new, as a newcomer, as someone from from another country, but yet they are seen and they are also heard in Concertabout Bruges. They have to feel a sort of link to come back to this building, and not just come to one performance and, okay, if you've been here and that's it. My goal and my mission is actually to connect them, and to connect these different people. So people who are already convinced about the different performances in Concertabout, our usual clients, and then also the new people who haven't reached yet. So I always allow them. I always introduce everyone to each other. You're new, she's new here, and he's been here forever, and so the person feels welcome. The person knows that this building is not imposing. This building is really welcoming to me. And then also these days there are also many instruments to allow them to come back to Concertabout at a cheaper price with a special pass, and it's really not how do I say, there is no stigma to it, because everybody's identity are discreetly how do I say, protected.
Yes.
So everybody has a similar card,
Yes.
but some people have extra discounts. So I really encourage the use of those cards. I always inform, so informing them, making them feel that they are seen here. I take a lot of pictures, I make a lot of videos, and I always post them, and I will tag different peoples, and they start becoming friends with each other, and it's so nice to see them taking part in projects, in different projects of Concertabout together, and telling other people further. So they are actually like my mini ambassadors for Concertgebouw, and they're telling other people, oh, did you hear in Concertgebouw they're doing this and that, and then they bring new people to me. So
that's absolutely wonderful. What I mean, that seems to me to be a brilliant example of design and equity, which was another of the things that Alexia was talking about. We're out of time. I would like you both. I'm going to sort of end with a very quick and very difficult question as a kind of closing sentence from both of you. But if you had one piece of advice that you would want to give anybody listening to this webinar today about, you know, how to really make this work meaningful, exciting, possible, creative, what would be your top tip that you would be able to share this morning? I know that's a horrible question from me to end with, but how would you like us to walk? What would you like us to take away from this?
Oh, just one.
Just one. Sorry, it's not Christmas yet.
There's too many. But I think based on what we discussed already, I think that and Lily mentioned this at the very beginning of her introduction. She said that she had an experience as a user. And I think it's very important for you to, as a professional, to put yourself back into the user seat. And for this, again, there's many exercises that you can do, but there's one that I very much like, is that if you, as Lily mentioned, if you consider that your user, when they come in your building, they feel that it's impressive, like too impressive, maybe a bit dominant, maybe a bit scary, think about the places that make you feel this way. And we all have very different places that will make us feel inadequate, scared, or not like we belong. And go to those places and have an experiment of your own and try and check, identify what makes you feel better and more welcomed and more welcome in general, and what doesn't. And take those learnings with you and see how you can apply them to your library or to your museum.
Top tip. Love it. Lovely. Wonderful. We all know what we'll be doing this afternoon. Lily, how about you? One thing that you would like to share, that impossible, I know, but what would you like to take people away, for people to take away from this morning?
It's a very difficult question. But I think for me would be connections, building connections with the users. It's so important to let them have the feeling that they are being listened to, and that they have a space, a safe haven in your institution, that they feel welcome, and that they feel that they can be themselves, and they can actually not just be themselves, but flourish as a person. I've seen so many people grow after stepping foot in this building, and it's so nice to see many positive testimonies, which I then proudly do share them as example on social media, to encourage and to also build, to use them as source of inspiration for other people, and to invite other people to take part in our projects. And
wonderful. 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 Thank you so much. What a wonderful way to start our webinar. I mean, we could talk for hours, and I'm sure that many more questions and thoughts will be being sparked off as we're speaking. There is a request in the chat that if there's any resources or ideas or names or links that connected to your work that you would be willing to share, that would be just so welcome. And if you are also happy for people to contact you, perhaps you might be able to just pop your email into the chat as a link, so that people can contact you afterwards and perhaps continue the conversation. But I just want to say thank you so very much for starting off our webinar in such an inspiring way. The work that you're doing is so important, so transformative and so hopeful. And I certainly have taken many things away from it. So thank you both. It's been lovely to have you here.